Hasn't learned is to disguise things in a opaque mug.
Are we on, Janet?
We are now live.
Oh, we're now live. Okay.
We're now live.
Good. Well, welcome, members. Welcome to Strategy Scrutiny meeting. I hope you're all well on this pretty grim evening.
Yes,
outside.
we are.
Oh,
yeah.
So are you okay, Janet, there?
Yeah.
Are we all good to go, Janet? I think there's a bit of a delay online.
Yes, we are. If you can just bear with me, I'm just going to shut down this. Yeah, we're just going to shut this down.
Janet, would you mute yourself, please?
Yeah, right. We're now live. It should be fine now.
Perfect. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Right, welcome everyone to the Strategy Scrutiny meeting. It's really good to see you all. I was just commenting on the grim weather outside. It's November, but Christmas is coming up, which will certainly get our joys back up. So welcome this evening. Please could I have the subs and substitutes and any apologies for this meeting, please?
Councillor Porritt has sent her apologies and her substitute is Councillor Smith. Councillor Parsons-Hulse has sent her apologies and Councillor Holsworth is here in her stead.
Ah, brilliant.
No, sorry, Councillor Prashad. Sorry.
No.
I don't know why. Yeah, it's my fault. It's Councillor Prashad. One of you is going to have to change your hair from blonde.
Well, we've got two fine councillors as substitutes, may I say. So it's good to see you all. Good.
Chair, can I just ask? Does Janet want Stuart and I to wear wigs or something, different coloured wigs, just to disprove that we are two different people?
Dear me.
Yeah.
Right, we'll crack on. We'll crack on.
Yeah.
Okay. Item number 3, the public are allowed. We're live on YouTube. Item number. Oh, so I don't have minutes on my agenda. Right. Item number 4, the minutes. Has everyone read the minutes? Are there any comments on the minutes at all? No. In that case, can I have a proposer that they are a true and accurate record? Councillor Barnes and a seconder, Councillor Carney. Yep. Perfect. All in favour, please. Great, and that's passed. Fantastic. On to the meaty stuff. The medium-term financial strategy. So, Chris.
Yep.
Have you got? Obviously, we've read the report. Is there anything additional that you'd like to comment?
I think it'd be helpful if I did a little bit of detail on this, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, this report obviously was written at a point in time, and we've had a substantial amount of new information since then. We've had the settlement come out to us. While we haven't seen the detail, it has changed some of the core assumptions here, which I'm sure you've all seen. For example, the council tax increase, we were assuming 3%. It's now at 5%. Contract inflation we had in at 8%. We haven't received that level of inflation within our contracts, but we did get additional money through social care, we believe. The energy budgets, we are not going to be protected going forwards in the way that the private sector is. So we aren't going to get that energy guarantee scheme, which is active now, but will be ending in the next few months. So that's something that we'll be needing to consider with our energy budgets now. With the higher pay awards, we had 5% in for next year. We're starting to hear it might only be 2% to be capped around that, but we'll have to wait and see. But we currently have 5 in, so that might be a bit of a saving as well. And in terms of the further financial support from the government, we're not going to get anything else over and above those inflationary amounts that we've already had. So I think it's worth noting that those key assumptions have changed somewhat since this report was produced. So yeah, I think other than that, the report goes through the process that we're going to go through in terms of setting the capital, the revenue budgets, and the key dates haven't changed at all. So we still have to get this set in the February meeting. So throw it out there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Dacre, is this one as a cabinet member?
Sort of. Well, one thing I just wanted to say was that I just want us to welcome Isabel Britton, who's here on the call, who's the interim head of finance. So there she is, just in case people hadn't.
Hi everybody. Thanks, Councillor Dacre. I was just keeping quiet and letting Chris tell the story.
Okay. So I did have a comment, but I can wait till everybody else has finished if you want.
No, crack on now. Absolutely.
Right. I just wanted to make it clear that Chris has said what's changed, and the assumption that we'd be able to raise council tax to only 3% has changed, but no decision has been made as to whether we would raise it to the 5% that's now permitted without a referendum, just to be absolutely clear.
No, that's good clarification. In that case, can I have questions, please? If members would like to use the raise the hand function, that would be absolutely great. But I believe, did Councillor Whittaker, did you put your hand up at one point? No. All right. In that case, apologies there. Any questions, members? Was that a breath? I don't know what that was. No. Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, one of the first above the parapet as normal. I think really what I like, and this is not really, I don't think Isabel can answer this question. I think this is more at Chris, is yeah, I noticed that some of the assumptions, some of the things have changed. What is causing sleepless nights in regard to this report? What is the real, down and dirty, shall I say? Even despite the changes that have now been introduced or potentially introduced.
I mean, the gap is still the 10.2 million. We are starting from a pretty significant financial gap, and that does grow in subsequent years. The pressure in social care is growing. That's driven by our demographics, and it's the very nature of the thing. So even with these with the settlement coming through and that social care support helping us through this, we still have a financial gap to address. There's massive challenges with the inflation. That is still climbing. We don't know when that will top out. And even if it tops out for the populace, will that top out for our building costs, our maintenance programs, things like that? So that's another uncertainty that we're trying to manage at the moment. So I think the main pressures for us are those things are beyond our control. So the council can work very hard to bridge that gap, and that's just a gap at a point in time, but it's something that we still need to consider moving forwards. So they're the things that would concern me.
Isabel, sorry, Chair, can I just come back? Yeah, and just say,
yeah,
Isabel, I know this is throwing you, into the lion's den, I'm afraid. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think
with your very limited experience of working in Calderdale.
Well, it's really unhelpful. I mean, as Chris was presenting that, I'm thinking to myself, this report was only written a matter of weeks ago, and already everything's changing. And I just think that that's the uncertainty of everything. Really, is what we have a problem with, because whilst we think Chris might well be able to quote you a figure, and then something else might happen. So it's likening it to the okey cokey, really. It's all change, in out, and let's just dance around whatever's going to happen next, because it is a bit of a kind of a point in time, and we might well, we set the budget, and then we obviously then have to deal with that budget for a year, and the things that change during the year, as we have found out from the monitoring that we're doing at the moment. So it's a difficult time for all of us in local government to make sure we deliver the services with the resources that we have.
Chair, can I just come back with one?
Yeah.
So obviously, as we I mean, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. Uncertainty abounds. In fact, the only certainty is uncertainty, I think, at this moment in time. As we go through, and as councillors, we go through this process of scrutinising the budget at scrutiny. What do you think are the areas we should be focusing on?
I think for me coming in, it's going to be those bigger budget items. It's got to be how can we make the resources in adult social care and children's services work for us. That will probably be my first sort of thought process. Making sure that we're using money in the right way. I mean, we obviously are looking at a series of savings opportunities at the moment, and a scrutiny of those savings opportunities is obviously going to be really important to make sure that members are happy with those decisions that are going to be made, that they're robust decisions and that they can be delivered, which is always key when you have a large organisation.
Okay, thank you. One, I suppose, sorry, I did say one final point. I've got another point. So, in a sense, what is it we can be looking at doing in order to ensure that those budgets that are set are met, and that we don't get, a situation where in 4 months' time or 4 months into the new year, we're suddenly looking at an increased deficit because the way the costs have continued to rise, or the demand for social care has increased exponentially. What is it we should be? Because we're coming to a position in the next 4 months where the council, the group, the Labour group will be submitting a budget, and we need to scrutinise that. And I think probably this year more than any other year, the role of scrutiny is going to be vital in that process.
I think if I was sitting on the outside and looking in, I'd probably be looking at what's happening this year and how have we taken account of that in next year's budget. I mean, that's the classic starting point, really, to make sure that you are, there is so much uncertainty, and it's about making sure you have the timeliness of the reports, that you can take action. Those points in which you maybe start to overspend in an area, that you have the opportunity to see that that's the direction of travel, and you might make changes to what the organisation delivers mid-year or at a point in time, whether that's freezing recruitment or stopping, non-essential items, or all of those types of things if you're in an overspend position. But it is probably just making sure an active, sort of timely presentation of that information.
Okay. Isabel, thank you very much. Welcome to the position, and thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, thank you. That was very insightful, and I think definitely as we go into the budget season, so to speak, it's definitely a good session we're having. One of the questions, pay awards, I mentioned in the report, and we all know the national minimum wage increase, etc., quite a substantial amount there. My question is, what effect does that have on the council, especially when in other organisations, it's not, if minimum wage goes up, it's not just minimum wage, it's also other bands within the staff. So my question is, to what level does that impact council finances?
So I'm happy to. So with this one for us, as you know, our pay awards agreed with the national employers, and we get the uplift agreed through that on our scale points, and then people can, as you say, climb within their own scale points. We don't have a huge number of staff at that very bottom end on the living wage or minimum wage. So for us, those increases aren't as impactful. You're right, they do have an impact. They set a scene. They do increase some of our costs, but in the main, that's where the bulk of our costs are driven from, that nationally agreed pay award.
Right. So at a local level, that won't impact us, the indirect consequence of the minimum wage increase.
Not as much. I mean, you could talk about, I mean, we could start moving into that tertiary impact where some of our people that we contract out with, some of the social workers, it'll drive up some of our agency costs and what have you potentially, which then feeds in back to our contracts. Trying to quantify that right now would be challenging because everyone's on different contracts, terms and conditions. So you're right, it would have an impact. Quantifying it would be challenging, but our core costs are driven by that National Pay Award more so.
Right, perfect. Yeah, that's grand. Thank you very much. Councillor Smith?
My question's relating to what Councillor Dacre said about the potential to raise council tax to 5%, by 5%, not to 5%, by 5%. Have we looked at the impact of that? And then the second question to that is, what would be the impact on our ability to collect that money, especially considering those on lower incomes that possibly get the discounts? Has any, have you had a chance to look at that? Or
we have started to model this up now, but it's, as you say, it's very early days yet, so I'm not in a position where we can share that kind of detail. And in terms of the impact on potential collection rates as well, that's something we would have to look at. We're aware of the cost of living crisis, and I'm sure that members are as well. So this would be something that we'll be working through over coming weeks to be sure of our position.
Good. Councillor Barnes?
Chair, yeah, I must admit, I thought you were going to ask the question, and then you didn't. Page 30, pay inflation 3% for 22-23 and 2% for future years. Seems a bit low. What are the reasons behind that? I noticed then it says, was it 5% and 2% for future years? Is that realistic? Probably a question to Chris.
Yeah, sorry, just trying to find the page 30 reference.
Page 30, that's page 14 of your report, page 14 and 15 of your report, page 30 and 31 of the agenda. Sorry, Chris. Apologies.
I've got you. No worries. So 3% for 22, 23 and 2% for future years.
That was the previous forecast, and then there's been an update to 5% this year, 5% 23 to 24, and then 2% thereafter.
Yeah, so this is us trying to work out, with the interest rates going up so much, we believe that inflation will start to come down quite quickly. It can't stay at these levels. And if repair awards were to continue at those kind of levels, the public sector as a whole would really start to creak and struggle. As a sector, it would be very, very challenging to make such large pay awards. So do we think it would be about that? We've tried to be realistic with this one. So we have put more in for next year and then starting to taper away, because otherwise, I mean, the Bank of England has a remit. You can see the forecast on their website. They are confident they will start to fall away, inflation and then interest, which would then reduce those pay awards.
Okay, so what was the assumptions for this year and what was the actual for this year? Going back to what Isabel said about using this year as the start point.
So in the end, it was the flat £1,925 that was paid out, which doesn't work as a nice clean uplift on a percentage across the board, because obviously that means a different percentage for different people. I think it comes out something like, is it something like 6.6 in the end? Yeah, 6.6 in the end, I think it was. So that 925 had a much bigger impact on the lower paid staff, because obviously they're getting like 10, 12, and then more senior staff, it's much lower.
So if the average is 6.6, what was the assumptions for this year?
We had in, I think it was 4 in the end, but I will have to check that for you and come back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris.
No probs. Councillor Carney?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. But like when I went to page 30 on the thing, I noticed something there that I didn't actually notice when I was reading it earlier in the week. It's got contract inflation in those bullets at the end of page 14 stroke page 30. It says contract inflation 2% increase year on year, but all through the rest of the report it talks about like 8%. Is there an explanation required there?
The previous forecast inflation in the approved budget was back at those levels. However, now we did lift it to 8 subsequently. So that's just it, because all of this is driven by a point in time. So that was the older ones. That's where we started when this was set last year. Since then, we've moved on from that. So yes, we did start a lot lower.
Good. Councillor Smith?
Sorry, I think that was a legacy hand. My only question was about the the overlying. I don't know if it's really a scrutiny question, but I'm sorry, on my other screen. It's just about the grant funding, 83%, revenue and reserves 0.3 million. Is it really as little as that? Or am I just misunderstanding it, which is quite possible? That's why I'm asking the question.
So
sorry, do you want to know the page number?
Yes, please.
It's page 28 of the agenda. At the top of the page, it just said. So it's the funding for the capital programme. So that might be getting confused.
That's fine. Yes, with the capital programme, we are on. Yes, it's very largely grant funded at Calderdale. So we've got a very large grant funding from Wicker to do the infrastructure work and everything else. And to give a sense of scale, Calderdale's population base and the size of the authority, without that, the capital programme that we can afford to fund ourselves in relation to that is significantly smaller. So yeah, that is true. But we have that large grant programme, so that plugs that gap for us.
So where do we get the revenue and reserves then? Is that?
So that'll be things like we're funding borrowing, actual borrowing we take. We'll have some capital receipts.
It's fine. I think I've misread it.
No worries.
Good, Councillor Dacre.
Yes, I think what perhaps Councillor Smith was wondering was that all the revenue and reserves that we had? Was that?
Oh no.
Yeah, and it's
definitely not.
That's just how much we use to fund the capital programme. I don't know if that's what. I think there might have been a bit of a confusion between question and answer.
Yeah, no, it's been explained. It's fine. Thank you.
Good. Okay then. Well, in that case, thank you very much, members. Thank you for the questions. I want to also thank Chris and Isabel. Welcome to Calderdale as well. I'm sure there'll be many more sessions in the future relating to these items. It's a regular report that comes to scrutiny. So welcome to Calderdale. On to the next item then, in that case, commercialisation. So we've got Chris for this item, and I believe we've also got Michael. Welcome, Michael. Are there, obviously we've got the report, are there any further comments that you'd like to make? Shall we start with Chris or Michael? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to set that scene and then pass it over to Michael to do the detail and everything else. That's okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so assume everyone's read the report. I think the important thing to highlight here is the work that Michael and the team have been doing around the visioning days and getting that engagement. So they are well thought of within the council. They do deliver a lot of value. I know it highlights the barriers here as well in terms of a potential lack of service capacity, urgent prioritisation, and some of those gaps in skills. So remark about, and it's something that the council have been working on, trying to allocate some more resource into this area to try and push this agenda forwards, because there's a recognition of the importance of doing business planning, as the report says, and it's something that I know that Robin is keen on as well, to get service plans or business plans, one and the same really, in place for each of the areas. And without being prescriptive about it, giving them the tools to do it or working with the team to do it, it's just making sure that we have sufficient resource to deliver that function as well going forward. So I think that's something that's very important to note. So I pass over to you now, Michael.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, good evening, councillors. Thanks for the invitation to join you this evening. As Chris said, we have had a lot of success with the visioning days, and these have been set up initially as a precursor to the business planning, particularly after COVID, so that services could almost take a step back and review how they deliver their services. and it's given us a really good opportunity to start the work on some of the business plans. And as you can see from the report, quite a number of business plans have been developed from these visioning events. We've found that there's been a requirement for some intense service support following the visioning days, for instance, from maybe human resources, from IT, from business intelligence, organisation development, which has been put in place on a kind of a team around the service approach, and that's worked really well. Members will probably remember our initial kind of foray into this commercialisation enterprising council, where we distributed business planning templates across the council and almost expected services to complete them. And due to the service capacity and prioritisation, that just didn't work at all. So what we found was the kind of the workshop approach was far more beneficial in giving that almost critical friend one-to-one support with service managers and teams, and that's paid dividends, and that's the sort of thing that we want to develop further. I think this kind of team around the service will pay dividends, particularly in unravelling just how services can operate differently in some cases, and maybe utilising a blank sheet of paper approach in some cases, really to define what the statutory duties are, what the discretionary duties are, whether there are any traded operations at the moment or opportunities, and maybe build up a service delivery looking at how other competitors, if it's traded, or other deliverers, if it's statutory, other councils are operating. So yeah, thank you. That's probably just adding a little bit to the report.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. When I'm looking at this report, I don't really get anything from it. I don't want to sound harsh. It's not, the only thing I've got from this is you do a bit of training, you're having these feedback days. That's about that's what's in this report. You know, what I'm more interested in is what has come from these days. You know, what you've come up with these business plans. What's in these business plans? You know, how are they going to actually improve the council for people who use our services? How are they going to these business plans, if it is commercialisation, how is it going to make the council money? Perhaps how is it going to reduce costs? You know, can you elaborate any further on that?
Chair, before then, I mean, can I just sorry to interrupt, but you know, when I saw this report on the work programme, I thought we were going to get some facts and figures and some details as to actually how and what the commercialisation was bringing in, and there's nothing here. You know, it's a nicely prepared report, can't deny that, but it doesn't actually, I don't think this achieved what we wanted it to on the work programme. It seems to be not what we wanted to see. And you know, it's you know, and I know Councillor Bellinger, when he was on here, was very adamant and very clear at certain times about, you know, that commercialisation was about what can the council bring in during these difficult times. And yes, we've seen some issues at other councils, but there's nothing here to say what the financial return has been, what the financial cost has been, and what the financial return of this report has been. I just don't see that at all. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Michael and Chris.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Our approach has been to embed enterprise and commercial thinking right across the council, to encourage the services to operate in a business-like way. So that's around reducing duplication. It's making sure that finances are properly appropriated, that there's no inappropriate internal charges, and that all council services are getting full cost recovery. So that's been the focus so far. When that's in place, I feel certain that we can start looking for opportunities, but that's been our work so far.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on what Michael said, I mean, for us, this is the start of that process, getting those business plans done, getting every area done, and then starting to join them up as a whole. Then we can start to look at, is there any synergies? Is there anything we can drive out those savings? It's not so much about, or it hasn't been to date, about trying to drive additional income for us as much as trying to deliver things more efficiently, effectively. And that's the kind of slant that we've been driving through our commercialism. Because that way, obviously, we're trying to minimize the risk in our service delivery, not doing anything too far out there. But I think once all the service plans are in place and we start to join this all up across the council, then you will be able to start getting those facts and figures that you're looking for, Councillor Barnes, in terms of the savings each specific area delivers. But at the moment, we're still working on getting all those service plans in place.
Chair, can I just follow up? So how long have we been doing this?
And I think on the back of that as well, I mean, you know, commercialisation it's not a new thing. You know, we've been banging on about it for years and years now as councillors, and probably officers are sick of us speaking about it, because the trouble with commercialisation, there is a bit of ambiguity there. You know, naturally there is ambiguity because you've got to find the opportunities. The one worry I've got with all this stuff is it's very much speaking in platitudes, it's very much speaking in opaque language, it's very much speaking around the issue, you know. And I mean this with the greatest respect, but sometimes we've just got to focus on, you know, I mean, we're talking about these business plans. It's probably taking up so much resource actually getting these business plans together. But sometimes you just got to focus on, number one, what's going to make the money, number two, what's going to make the savings, and number three, where's the opportunities. You know, it's as simple as that. It's as straightforward as that. And I think scrutiny moving forwards, scrutiny can actually play a big role in this. And this is actually something which I think we need to work with you probably closer on. Following on from this report, possibly we could do one of these scrutiny a day sessions, actually understand where you are at with these business plans, and let's put it in simple language, what we're actually going to do as a council. Perhaps there might be an opportunity there. But that's my starter for 10, really. I think this is very much like you've mentioned, it's the start of something. Hopefully we can help forge a future.
Yes, I'd certainly welcome that, Chair. I would.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, enough of me commenting on that. So we've got Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Michael and Chris. And I suppose I'm speaking a bit with my audit chair hat on here. Chris, you'll know that how keen audit have been on these business plans and getting them in place and getting them to a point where every service has one. So I do welcome that. I share the sentiments that have already been said by Councillor Barnes and Robinson. I did get from this report that it was a bit rhetorical, not much substance to it, as Councillor Barnes refers to, and it feels, and I don't mean to dumb down your efforts at all, Michael, you seem like a bit of a one-man band at the minute. There doesn't seem to be much of a drive to really embed this in services. It seems to be an as and when jobby, people have time to kind of engage and get involved with it, and then that's when progress is being made. So I would like to see a bit more of a drive to properly embed this direction in the council, but appreciate you can't do it alone. And I think the council really need to have a serious look at building this team up to give that proper support so we can make some proper progress across the board. Thanks, Chair.
Absolutely. Okay then, so we've got Councillor Dacre.
Sorry, board members first.
No, you go on, Councillor Dacre.
Okay, right. Thanks. So yes, I appreciate what everybody's saying, and yes, you will see from the report that for the last several months it's been Michael on his own, and for a while before Helen, whom some of you may remember, came on board, it was Michael on his own. So we hear the things that members are saying about more resources, and I think you heard Chris say that the council recognises this and that Robin recognises this, and I certainly do. But again, I would just really, I mean, I think I'd have a plea for it no longer to be called the commercialisation team, but for it to be called the business planning team, because that's what it's about. And it's not, first and foremost, it is about areas of the council sitting down, looking at what they do, deciding whether that's what they should be doing, and then deciding on the most efficient, cost-effective and social value method of doing that. If there is a traded service in there, then you obviously look at how you want to run that in a commercial fashion. But first and foremost, it isn't about money-making opportunities. It's about running the services effectively to achieve what they're supposed to be achieving in line with the Vision 2024 and the council's priorities. And so when people want to ask for what money's saved, and what money's made, very often neither of those will apply, because in reality the service that you're talking about might have the same amount of money, but it's just doing things differently, and that's much harder to demonstrate. And I suppose that's partly why the report ends up being a bit general. So if you were to do a scrutiny in a day, perhaps, then it might be easier to perhaps look at one of these and see exactly how it works and what happens and what comes out at the end of it, and not be hoping that we're all of these exercises in every branch of the service is going to provide savings or produce commercial opportunities, because it just doesn't work like that.
I think that's actually, it's a good point Councillor Dacre raises there. Possibly one of the problems here is, you know, what's actually the definition of commercialisation? You know, I suppose that's something actually that we need to dwell a bit of time on, really. So therefore, we're not speaking at cross purposes, really. For example, when I've spoken about commercialisation on this board since I was first elected, commercialisation has always been about making money. But I appreciate, you know, that direction might have changed somewhat, or, you know, I don't know. I think it's probably important to really, Michael, what do you think commercialisation is?
Well, our focus has always been about getting our own house in order and making our services the most efficient and effective that we can. We set up a local authority trading company back in 2018, I think it was, as the vehicle, as the mechanism for any profit-making activities. And that's sat on the shelf ever since 2018, because we're not in a position to make any profit from our services. We've been more focused on making sure those services are getting full cost recovery. We can make a contingency, a surplus for research and development, but as you know, under the Local Government Act, we're not allowed to make a profit. So any profit-making activities that we did become engaged in would go through the local authority trading company, and that's in place. But our main focus, and I do kind of welcome the observations that it is a one-man band at the moment, and a lot of the focus and time has been spent encouraging services to have robust business plans which accurately assess the statutory duties, how much time and cost is put into that, and making sure that the finances are properly appropriated. As Chris said, when every service has a business plan and they all go onto the dashboard, we should be in a position then to start looking at projects, particularly around a commercial focus. I think Councillor Dacre is absolutely right that the term commercialisation is somewhat misleading on this. I ran my own business for over 20 years, and that was a commercial business in the private sector, and that was driven by profit and customer repeat business. The local authority is in quite a different position, as we all know. So I think this term commercialisation is misleading for what we're trying to achieve in Calderdale. Sorry, Chair, if that was rather a long drawn out.
No, I think it's a really helpful discussion. I really do. Okay, then next on the list is Councillor Carney.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The only real question I've got, and a number of you have touched on it, it's a team of one just now. The person wasn't named in the report, but now I'm learning that it's Michael. So I mean, there's sort of like the top of page 4 on the report, page 46 on the minutes. It says that the process of recruiting a new team member to this will be revisited in 2022, but we're coming perilously close to the end of the year. Is there an update in this? I mean, I'd imagine it's a potentially big workload for a single person and an apprentice. And will Michael's workload not be added to because he'll have the added responsibility of training the apprentice, if that's if that's still the strategy that we're going along on the recruitment side of things?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Chair, would you like me to?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. Yeah.
Yes, it is a good point around the capacity of this team to deliver. We did employ an intern back in 2019, and that intern was really valuable in bringing a theoretical and a research approach to the work that we were doing. The intern subsequently applied for a permanent role as commercialisation officer, which was really successful, and that gave us that added capacity to develop the e-learning, to embed the training, this modular training, to develop elected member training, and push it forward. Now, subsequently in July, that commercialisation officer resigned and took up a post in another local authority who were following exactly the same route as Calderdale have pursued around commercial business partners and embedding this culture change. So I am recruiting a replacement for that officer. We did look at an apprentice back earlier on this year before the commercialisation officer resigned to try and develop and grow the team a little bit more. Unfortunately, that's the applicant that we had for the apprenticeship wasn't suitable, and just at the moment I would prefer to get a commercialisation officer that will hit the ground running and maybe look at an apprentice or another intern possibly early next year. But my main focus is to recruit a commercialisation officer and develop this team around the services so that we can really drive forward the business planning.
Can I just do a wee follow up there? So
Yes.
Once you've got the actual officer in place, is the intent there to then go back to looking at bringing in an apprentice? Because I know that the way that the councils want to go is develop its own talent via apprentices and stuff like that. So you would, I would favour, still, making a team of 3, 2 and an apprentice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we do need to grow the team, whether that's another intern that we can bring in, or an apprentice, or both even. I think the difficulty with the apprentice was that it's a bit of a strange role, because if, just as been said already, you say commercialisation and people, it doesn't fit nicely into a box as a lot of the other apprentices. So it's really making sure that we get the right person into that role to develop more of a transformation, organisation development focus to the work that we're doing at the moment, rather than it just being viewed as a commercial opportunities role. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's really helpful discussion. Can I bring in Councillor Sutherland? Sorry, you've been waiting a while.
It's okay, Chair. Thank you for bringing me in. I agreed with a lot of the sentiments that speakers made earlier about the paper. A very good paper, but it wasn't exactly what I was anticipating. I think, as discussed, a lot of it does come down to how we define commercialisation. What I'm reading feels very much like we're looking at business efficiency, business planning. For me, commercialisation, whatever it was going to be in the details, it was about the council looking outside. And not just looking inward, but looking outward, finding opportunities, seizing opportunities, in the face of the rather urgent issues that we have around the budget. And we just had that outlined to us just before, and really looking to find whatever we can do to protect services and reduce the burden on the taxpayer, because this could ultimately be people losing their jobs if we have to close services, or it could be an increased burden on taxpayers. But I do welcome some of the work that's been going on so far, because I don't think that you can fully look outside and seize opportunities if you've not got your ship in order. And the Scrutiny panel did a review of this back in 2018, and it's good to see that some of those aspects have been carried forward, because some of those recommendations were for the internal stuff. But other recommendations, such as the company, have obviously just sat on the shelf and nothing's proceeded with them, despite, I think members had a really clear will and wish on this matter. To help steer us for future conversations, has there been anything that's come out of the discussion so far? Are there any areas where you think within the council that there are opportunities for perhaps trading or other opportunities where we can either grow services by trading or bring in some other benefit by working with outside partners?
Yes, I think the work that we've done around Shibden Hall and the business planning that the museum service linked with the green spaces and street scenes has done to develop that around the Ann Lister phenomenon, that's been really successful, and that came out of kind of the business planning approach there. We're looking at several opportunities at other sites, which I can go into greater detail if you like at this visioning day with members to unpick the commercialisation approach that we're having. Some of these are commercially sensitive, but I think there's a willingness in the services to look at how to develop these commercial opportunities, providing that they're viable. We've looked at a number of sites across the council as well, which I can give further detail if you require.
I mean, I'd already said leave it to the chair as to whether he wants to extend that discussion tonight or whether he wants us to bring back proposals.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'll pass it on to Mike first, but I think we're definitely, some detail offline possibly, and let's delve into the detail offline. I think that could be really beneficial because it's an interesting piece, and I think Dan's spot on with his comments there. So yeah, I think actually delving into the business plans offline and maybe having one as an example and getting into the Shibden Hall stuff where we've got a bit more time could be quite beneficial. But I'll go on to Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, a couple of things, Chair. Thank you for that. I think firstly, I didn't want to be. I'm not trying to be derogatory to the hard work and effort that Mike has done on it, and if that came across the beginning, I do apologise on that. I think Dan and George have summed it up. I think we need to take this offline and look at a business plan, and with that, we can then make some recommendations back as to actually what we can then make some recommendations back as to what commercialisation means for the council, because we've heard 2 or 3 different views as to what commercialisation is, and that I think would help Michael and his team. Hopefully, that the team that he will get. Build and go forward, and then we don't have these arguments in 12 months' time, or these arguments with potentially maybe new councillors or new members of this committee as to what commercialisation means, because we've heard a couple of different ideas, and I think it would be useful if we did this offline, looking at a business plan to come with that and make some recommendations back. But I also think it would be very good to bring this back regularly, at least once, if not regularly, back to this committee, maybe in 6 months, once we've done that development plan, once we've gone through that, once we've looked at it and made those recommendations back into cabinet and into the council as to how we're going forward. I'm trying to pull together what people have been saying, and hopefully I'll pick that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment, Mike, because and Michael, you know, I do feel for you. This is such a big remit, and I wouldn't know where to start. You know, I really wouldn't know where to start if this was me dealing with this. And I think your efforts have been absolutely sterling today. The fact that you've pulled together all of these focus groups with officers, these business plans, that's massive in itself. You know, and you're dealing with all of the administration, all of the organising. It's quite difficult then to get your head into a position where you can focus on the actual improvement. So I 100%, you know, I understand how difficult it must have been, how challenging it must have been. But I think the work you've done clearly is very well done from me. And this, as Mike said, I think this is a really good opportunity now. If we could take this offline, actually deep dive into the detail offline, have a look at some of these business plans and maybe make suggestions on number one, what is actually commercialisation. I think that's probably quite an important thing. So then at least we're not, as a board, not speaking on cross purposes, you know. Number one, what is it? And also number two, you know, what are the council plans and how can we influence that as a board? I think that's a really exciting thing. And if we could get this report back in 6 months' time, or following on from what we've done offline, you know, how that's worked in 6 months' time, I think that's really exciting, personally. So if that's okay with you, Michael, I'd like to propose that to the board as a plan of action.
Absolutely, I welcome that, Chair. I really do. I think when we've facilitated councillor training around enterprising council and commercialisation, and we've invited service managers to come and share the work that they're doing, which I think we've had 5 different service managers who've come and spoken to yourselves at these training sessions. That's been really well received, because it's you know, the support, we're all in it together basically, and I think the more support that everybody can get around this is really welcome, and I certainly welcome all the support that I can get in driving it forward.
Absolutely, well, we're all behind you, definitely. Okay, so I'll go Chris, Councillor Lynn, and then I think Mike wants last words, and then we'll bring it to a close. But I think it's a good item.
That's fine. I mean, really, I don't want to take up too much more time, and it's just to leave some thoughts. Obviously, I finish with the authority imminently. And I noted the growing your own agenda, and I think that's really important. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind, sometimes you need to bring in a level of expertise, or people can hit the ground running to pair with that. So growing your own can take time. That is great. But sometimes you need something quicker than that. And even if you do your own, making sure they get the right exposure to different circumstances, different ways of thinking, different environments. So trying to make sure we cycle them around, get them out with partners, keep them in-house or just in one place. It can make it challenging and limit their experience base. and that can limit what they bring to the table when they're doing some of these things. And I suppose the other thought I was just going to leave with is getting the service plans in place for all of the service areas in the first instance, those business plans. That's got to be the priority. A lot of the low-hanging fruit, the biggest efficiencies you'll get are from delivering those. Looking externally later, you'll understand your risk profile, you'll know where you stand as an authority and what your free cash flow is to go and do those things as well. So it really is getting your house nice and tidy and in order with a strong business platform to build from, the same as you would in the private sector or when you're delivering any other kind of business. So just a couple of thoughts to leave you guys with before your day, which I will not be there for. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, you know my feelings on all this, Chris, that you're leaving, but you know my feelings on it. I'm sorry that you're going. Don't get me going again. Okay, Councillor Lynn.
Yes, just very quickly. Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to kind of give a sort of brief perspective from public services side of things. Just to give sort of 2 or 3 examples, because I think people have sort of there's been a wish to kind of feel like, what does it feel in reality? So just a couple of examples of where over the last few years, public services have really had to figure out what would we do as a commercially minded organisation. One of these aspects would be the digitisation. People probably know, and people have mixed views about the move to persuade our residents to communicate more with us online. And I should have the figures at my fingertips, but I don't. But you can imagine that the cost per dealing with each inquiry, each online inquiry, either how that compares with dealing with it via a phone call or dealing with it via an in-person visit it's a magnitude of several times over, really. So one of the things that we've really worked hard to do, for example, in terms of people reporting fly tipping or block gullies or anything else like that, is that we've tried very hard to encourage people to use it to go online, and that has been partly driven by our determination to drive down the cost of the services. Another example, I think, where I think public services, along with other departments in the council, have got to be really commercially minded, is there are a number of traded services that we offer where we've got to be market sensitive. One of them would be, for example, if we're our bereavement services. Can you believe it? But our bereavement services, we need to understand what the costs are of providing our funeral services, our cremation services and so on, but also what is a reasonable amount to ask people to pay, which compares favourably with what other similar facilities in neighbouring areas are offering. There's a whole number of examples like that. We've already heard about the example of what we're trying to do to capitalise on the attractions like Shibden Hall, Gentleman Jack, our museums and so on. I think there probably is a lot more that we can do to generate more income from the public who want to come and visit some of our attractions, because it's not just Shibden Hall, we've got some great museums and so on. We could probably do a great deal more there. So I'd welcome an opportunity to have officers from public services to come and talk to you if you want an example, if you want some examples of that. And we'd like to listen to you and see what ideas you might have of things that we ought to be investigating. But the final point I would make is, please remember that public services, in common with all the other directorates of the council, have seen a really major reduction in capacity. It's one thing if you're a business organisation that has spare capacity and you think, right, okay, we don't want to lose our staff. How can we sell their services to other people so that they're bringing income in? But the fact is, we don't have any surplus staff now. We don't have any surplus capacity, and therefore that significantly trims your sales as far as being able to generate new commercial opportunities goes. I hope that helps, Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely. Final words from Mike.
Thank you, Chair. And I think members have made it clear what they want to do, and actually have anticipated some of the things that I was going to say. I was just going to suggest that perhaps after the meeting, we might manage to find a pressed man or woman to join myself and Michael, and perhaps having a discussion about how this sort of more detailed look as a scrutiny day offline could go ahead in the next month. So we do a bit of planning work, myself and Michael, if Michael's able to do that, and one member, and then come back perhaps to the January meeting with a proposal on the way forward.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think that the key thing is I don't think we want this to be a scrutiny review which takes too much of Michael's time, because he's already hard pressed, So we don't want to, absolutely put loads of meetings in your diary, etc., Michael. So don't worry too much about that. Let's do this as flexible as possible. Give us some reading to do, Michael, and we'll certainly look at the business plans and feed into it. I think after this meeting, let's send an email out, Mike, to try and find out who would like to be part of this informal group. I think that's probably the best way to proceed. If that's agreed, yeah. Good. Well, thank you very much, members. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Chris. Really do appreciate you coming this evening. Good. On to the next one. So the council's response to the cost of living crisis. In that case, please can we have, let me just get my agenda up. Councillor Carney, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So in June, this scrutiny panel decided that the council should put together a response to the cost of living crisis. It was decided that it would be best done by a small group of cross-party elected members from all the scrutiny panels. The line-up ended up as being Councillor Durrans and Evans and Children and Young People, Councillor Blagborough, Adult Health and Social Care, Councillor Holdsworth from Place, and Councillor Lee was co-opted as a representative of this panel and myself. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to put in record my thanks for the aforementioned members for the manner in which they approached the task, because they demonstrated clear compassion and empathy. I'd like to also thank the representatives of the partner organisations, because without them, the message wouldn't have been as informed as it's turned out to be. The consensus was that the chair should be a member of this panel, and I was proposed to be the chair. In my absence at one of these meetings, I hasten to add, as I was away in family business. That's a good incentive to pull out all the stops to attend these meetings, I feel. Lesson learned there for myself. We met a few times as a group, and we discussed the approach, airing our initial thoughts. The main meeting was broadcast live on YouTube with all the partner organisations as well as the aforementioned members contributing. But the main bulk of the work was done by a couple of brilliant officers, Mike Lodge, Bella Jessup. They might take the view that they were just doing their jobs, but I'd like to thank them too. They distilled all our verbal contributions and put together the report that's before you this evening. The hope is that you'll approve it being passed on to the next stage in the process of it being our response as a council. We've made 9 recommendations that range from what we can do as individuals, members, council, and things that we would hope to, to happen at a national level as well.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much in that case. Members, Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Kenny, for the work you've done on the presentation on it. I think there's some really excellent stuff in here, and I think, if anything, just getting people talking in the council and with the partners, I think, is just a really important process of bringing people together so they're aware of the challenges that we mutually share in providing support to people. But there's something that I felt was missing from the recommendations, perhaps, in terms of some action we might be able to take. Now, it references in the back end of the report a few times about warm spaces. And it also mentions that VAC we're going to do a follow-up, I'm just scrolling back down to it, a follow-up survey in October about warm spaces. So it almost felt like the report almost leads towards some sort of action or recommendation on warm spaces, or that there's at least some follow-up conversations to be had. Obviously, if we are going to do anything around that, and to be clear, for me, warm spaces aren't just giving people a radiator to gather around. It could be a community meal, it could be bingo, it could just be a cup of tea. fundamentally, really, it comes down to getting some money out to community groups so they can open their halls and put the heating on, whatever activity they might do inside. But it just felt like the report sort of tells a story on that and then doesn't quite resolve it. So I just wondered if there was any update or whether there's anything further we could do to look at that, see whether we are doing anything as a council or whether there is anything further we could be doing, because it's these next few critical months where that will be the most beneficial.
Yeah. Is that, yeah.
Do you want me to come back on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're right, Dan. We probably do need to have a discussion, along those lines. But I mean, the one thing that came out in my conversations with Mike and Bella, like, we could keep writing this forever. And the whole point is, to actually be hoping to affect a wee bit of change.
Yeah, good. I think it was Mike next.
I'll go at the end to members, Councillor Robinson, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Smith.
It was just about feedback from organisations on accessing, the council's benefits, like the grants that the council have done, because the council have got quite a lot of things out there to help people, but I don't know. I just wondered if there was any feedback about how accessible things were, in terms of people accessing emergency living support and community living support and discretionary housing payment. I know that the council have done a lot about that, but I've raised issues about we're talking about digitisation, yet to access a community living support grant, you have to write it out on a form and then scan it back in. It's kind of, some of the things I found were quite difficult, and I wondered if any, accessing the things that we have got, if there's anything mentioned about that.
Is Councillor Kearney, would you like to come in on this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's another good point. One of the things that I'd sort of like mentioned during the meetings were like those websites, like, I can't remember the exact name of it, but there's like, it's entitled.co.uk or something, I can't remember. You can sort of like fill in your personal details, and it tells you what you might be, eligible for, from an income, point of view, maybe boost your income a wee bit. But it's probably a good shout, to recommend streamlining application processes for things like that. Whether we'd be able to actually, change any of that. I mean, I suppose the council's got a few things that you have to apply for online. So, it could be a good thing to have a look at those to see how easy they are for residents to fill in and follow up on.
Yeah. Good. Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, I think first I'd like to say is that, when we do cross-party work, this and the problem debt, I think we get some really good reports out of it, and I think we need to recognise that and thank those members that were involved in that, both members and officers who were involved in it in the production of this report, with some pretty good recommendations. It's interesting that a couple of recommendations seem to have been accepted by the government, so well done to the group. I'd like to think it was all the work of Calderdale Council and its cross-party work that has delivered this. So thank you for that on those recommendations. I think we've summed it up. Councillor Kearney said, you could continue writing this every day and change it. I think what we need to do then, as a committee, and I think following on from what Councillor Sutherland said, is really this needs to be almost not quite a standing item on the agenda, but as close to as we can get. And I know Mike is now panicking. I've seen the look in his eyes. That's Mike Lodge, by the way, for anybody. Too many mics in this world, just common. But I think it ought to be, because, if you look at some of the recommendations, which is, signposting, I think we need to be looking at that and saying, what has been done about that. And I think if we leave it 3-6 months, I think that might be too long. So I just wonder whether or not it's something we ought to look at in that aspect of it, in a sense that we do get a sanity check, to quote the Marx Brothers, on a monthly basis on this. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. It's almost, you know, it's like these things almost requires that when, and I think we all do it, to be fair, 'cause it's at the forefront of our own minds, definitely. Not least because when you're managing your own budgets, you know, it's you're always looking at the receipts when you go food shopping now. It's become common practice, but you know, I think it's an important reminder that when we do review reports on the board, that it does need to be at the forefront of questions. Okay, I'll go on to Councillor Lynn.
Thank you. Yes, just to say thank you very much to Stuart and everybody else that was involved in this work. And we recently presented a report to Cabinet about the cost of living, which made specific mention of this, along with the other Fuel Your Knowledge event that we had also in September. And so I think there's been some really good things that have come out of this. One of the things, and I think it's understandable that as a scrutiny board, you would want to know what's happened to the recommendations that you're bringing forward and so on. So I wondered if I might make a suggestion, and I don't know if Mike could perhaps help with this, but that is that once with this report going forward, that it should perhaps be taken up by our cost of living, our anti-poverty partnership, because that meets on a regular basis. It brings together many of the people that came and testified, gave testimony to your scrutiny in a day session and everything. So because the whole point about it is that it's a partnership. The council is involved, but so are lots of the other organisations that you heard from there. So I think that it would be good to take it to ask that partnership to take a look at this. And perhaps just to see if we can pull together a response that you could consider at a future meeting. And as you were saying, maybe not 6 months away, quite soon. You're going to discuss your work programme after this, but I'm sure that we could do something to put that together and to respond to the 9 recommendations that you've put down there. They won't all have been done, but some of them we will have made progress on. So I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Absolutely, I think that's good. Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the members who got involved in this work and the officers from across the council who supported us, and Councillor Kearney for picking up the chairing of it so effectively. And thank you for your kind words. I should say that before she left, Lauren Lobley was also involved in this work, so she was the third musketeer, if you like. During the discussion, officers and councillors came to us and said the problems facing Calderdale because of the cost of living crisis are in different ways as big or bigger than those from the COVID pandemic. So during 2020 and 2021, I was in scores of scrutiny meetings that talked about the pandemic, and I expect that across the 4 scrutiny boards, issues coming out of the cost of living crisis will be either debated as agenda items in their own right, or sometimes as the context for other discussions. We were discussing the cost of transport for children and young people with special educational needs at Place last week, which is just one example. One of the things that Lauren Lobley actually pushed with me and Bella was the fact that we're talking about a much larger group of people being affected by the cost of living crisis than we previously have talked about. And if you look at rates of, for example, fuel poverty, I was reading recently about rates going up from 10% to 40 or 50% of the population. So I think that emphasises the point about the scale of it. If I may suggest to members, I certainly recommend that you agree with the suggestion from Councillor Lynn that you recommend this to the anti-poverty strategy. And I go to those meetings, and I'm sure Sarah Richardson, who chairs those meetings, would welcome one. either Councillor Kearney or Councillor Robinson or some other members coming and talking to that group about that. I would suggest that you recommend your report to Cabinet, and that will give an opportunity for a member to go to Cabinet and talk about the outcomes of this work. I think one of the good things is that actually it was a cross-party piece of work and also a cross-council piece of work. So, for example, I know that Sarah Richardson within Public Services is picking up on quite a lot of work about warm spaces. So some of this will be about confirming that the things that you said in your report are being picked up and considered by each of the directorates, and I'm sure in many cases they are. So I'm sorry to be a little bit lengthy on that, I'm not normally, but I would suggest you recommend this to Cabinet and to the anti-poverty strategy, picking up the points in the minutes that you've made about access, as Councillor Smith has talked about, and warm spaces. And I'm sure that this will come back, if not as a standing item, but certainly before the end of the municipal year. Thank you, Chair.
That sounds like a proposal. So, yeah, you know, and then, so we've got, I think there's three recommendations there. And then the fourth one is to thank the scrutiny group and the chair for the hard work. How does that sound? Yeah. Well, in that case, I'm happy to propose that. So, Mike, you've wrote the blurb down, haven't you?
Yeah.
Perfect. In that case, I'm happy to propose that. Can I have a seconder? Yeah. All in favour, please. Perfect. Thank you very much. Good work. Good work, Stuart. Okay. Work programme, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, there's one amendment. At the start, there's one amendment to make to the work programme, and that's to move to ask you to move the item on the budget process from January to February. If you remember, in previous years, Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Board has produced a summary report of the comments from all 4 scrutiny boards, which means that you have to deal with it last rather than first or earlier in the process. So I did say in the chat earlier on, I'll just briefly talk about the scrutiny involvement in the budget process. I met earlier on with Chris Forrester and Isabel Britton, who were with you earlier, to talk about this. And Amanda Venning is going to arrange a briefing, as we've had in previous years, about the budget context for the 12th of January at 6 o'clock. That date may change, but that's the anticipated date. And Isabel has agreed to come and talk to a wider group of members across all the scrutiny boards, and indeed any member who wants to attend, about some of the discussions you had earlier on about the context in the medium-term financial strategy, which may well have changed or been nuanced again by the time we get to January the 12th. So that will be the first stage for members in this scrutiny process. We will then, I understand Cabinet anticipates publishing a draft budget proposal on the 16th of January, and then those proposals will come to each of the 4 scrutiny boards, and Strategy and Performance will produce a summary report that myself and Bella and hopefully a third colleague, as we're trying to appoint at the moment, we'll work that up very quickly and get that into Cabinet. One suggestion from the meeting with officers, and I'm sure that they haven't had a chance to talk to Councillor Dacre yet, or to Councillor Tim Swift, is that we try and get the conclusions from the other scrutiny boards into Cabinet members, not into formal Cabinet, as early as possible, so that Cabinet's got a bit more time to consider them. And I thought that was a sensible suggestion from the colleagues in finance that I was talking to this afternoon. So I'd like to put that up as a proposal. So the formal response will come from Strategy and Performance to Cabinet, but we will put just a summary of the discussions in the other 3 scrutiny boards, so that Cabinet can have sight of it and a chance to think about it with a little bit more notice a week or so in advance. So that's the proposal for the scrutiny of the budget process, and you are the senior scrutiny board in that process, because you put it all together, which gives you the chance to see if there are any cross-cutting issues across the 4 scrutiny boards that arise through those discussions. So I'll pause there, Councillor Robinson, just before we move on, if I may.
I think that's a really good point, Mike. And I think what I think could be good, because you see, I quite like it when the other boards, to be honest, they've got control over their own little part of the budget. I think it's only quite right that they've, got full remit and full control over what's in their portfolio. Could Safe Place have a discussion on all the place items within the budget? Would you be able to produce, like you've just mentioned, a summary and almost like mini recommendations, a summary of the discussion, mini recommendations, and then all we do on ours is we just put it as an appendix on the back of our report? Is that possible? So then, therefore, Cabinet members will have the other scrutiny boards' discussion and their recommendations beforehand, before it's released, and all we do is just append it on the back of our report.
To be honest, Chair, that's more or less what we do and what we've done in previous years. So that's not a problem. The only addition I would be for you as a scrutiny board to look across the other 3. So there may be, for example, and this is a hypothetical example, there may be cross-cutting issues about staffing issues, or cross-cutting issues about the relationship with the voluntary sector, or something like that, that you may want to produce a sort of a summary of those issues across the other boards. But yes, that's exactly the process I would suggest you follow.
Yeah, well, sounds like a plan, my man. Anything else, members? Yeah, Mike?
The only other thing to say is, actually, and I think I might be at fault for this, so apologies for this, but it looks like we've got a fairly quiet January. So I'll try and have a discussion with Councillor Robinson and Councillor Swift as the Deputy Chair about the January agenda, but please do email in if there's anything that you think about later that you think we should be discussing at the next meeting, because it's a relatively thin agenda at the moment.
I mean, the budget discussion is quite a lengthy item, though, isn't it?
But that's moving to February, Chair.
Right. In that case,
it's a very blank space.
when you're saying it's looking thin, you mean there's nothing on there?
Yeah, it was something of a euphemism, Chair.
Okay. Well, in that case, yeah. If anyone's got any thoughts, please do feed them back to Mike and myself, and we'll put it on the agenda for January.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. In that case, I want to thank everyone. I know Councillor Lynn left before the work programme, but only quite right. I want to thank Councillor Lynn, Councillor Dacre for attending. I also want to thank officers. Thank you, Michael, Chris, and Isabel. Best of luck in the role. And thank you, members. Thank you, Mike, as well. And see you on the other side.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Chair.